The first shells came low and fast, tearing white scars into the water and beach. Before dawn, the boats scraped shingle at Ari Bernu. Men crouched behind thin boat walls and watched bullets stitch the water. The order was simple: out and forward. When keels jarred, Australians and New Zealanders went over the gunwales into ground they did not recognize from the map. Ravines ran like claws up the slopes, scrub tore at uniforms, and every rise led to another. Somewhere ahead, machine guns spoke in short, bright syllables, and the cliff returned the echo with interest. What should have been a clean line inland turned instead into a scramble for any fold of earth that could be dug into a trench. Gallipoli began as an idea: force the Dardanelles, take Constantinople, and end Ottoman war-making. In London, it looked elegant, a flank to crack the stalemate. In March 1915, the Allied fleet tested the straits with battleships and sweepers. Shore guns and mines answered. In a single day, 3 capital ships, Bouvet, Irresistible, Ocean, were lost. Others limped away. The sea vetoed. The army would have to go. The landings came on April 25, 1915. At Cape Helles, British and French troops went ashore on multiple beaches under machine gun arcs that shredded the surf. At Anzac Cove, the Australians and New Zealanders landed north of their intended point and clawed upward through abrasive scrub. Geography wrote the first chapter of defeat. Every yard from the beach rose toward Sari Bear's spine, Baby 700, Chunuk Bear, the neck, names that became shorthand for loss. Ottoman commander Mustafa Kemal understood the ground and moved fast. "I am not ordering you to attack," he told a battalion. "I am ordering you to die." Men did, on both sides, in the thousands. By nightfall, beachheads were narrow scars. Digging became instinctive. Water arrived hot in tins, heat made food rot and tempers snap. Winter later reversed the cruelty with sleet and frozen ground. Flies came in black sheets that moved like a separate weather. Latrines overflowed. Sickness traced the same lines as orders. Dysentery, typhoid, trench foot, preventable miseries, marched beside them. The soundscape settled into a brutal routine. Rifle cracks too close to count, the thud of shells in the ridges, stretcher poles on sand, and now and then the elastic silence after a bombardment when no one knew who still lived. At Helles, the fight ossified. The first days were slaughter. V Beach became a name spoken quietly, the Collier River Clyde run aground as a landing stage, her doors dropping to let men sprint for sand and die in swaths. French troops pushed at Cumcale and later shifted to Helles to grind forward. Battleships hurled shells into the ridges. Each advance bought a line of graves. The distances on the maps were inches. On the ground, they were a week of bleeding for a stone wall and a field cut by wire. At Anzac, the front coiled into a cramped amphitheater where every ridge had a name and every name had a story. The neck was a saddle of ground, commanded by Ottoman positions above. In August, in a plan that depended on timing that never came, waves of Australian light horsemen were ordered to charge. They knew the range and the outcome. Some pinned farewell notes. They went over anyway. Seconds turned into a harvest of men. By the time the bugles stopped, ground gained was bodies. That August offensive, the last major effort, spread across the heights. Suvla Bay, Chunuk Bear, Hill 971. Fresh landings at Suvla met confusion. Water points went untaken while Ottomans swarmed. New Zealanders and British units fought up Sari Bear in night battles where direction dissolved. For 2 days, New Zealanders held Chunuk Bear before Kemal's counterattacks pushed them off. Courage piled up without leverage, and the line refused to move. Life settled into a ritual with a cruel sense of humor. Rations arrived gritty, jam soured in the sun, Men shaved with brackish water and wrote letters. By day, snipers shot at any glint. By night, patrols crawled. A lull could turn lethal when a single shot drew answers. Bombing parties worked with sacks of grenades and short fuses, then gave back the ground at dawn. Men learned the shape of the peninsula by listening. Where a bullet sounded flat meant a gully, where it cracked, long meant a ridge. The gullies took names from happenstance and appetite. Shrapnel Gully, Monash Valley, Plugge's Plateau, and those names outlived the men who made them. Ottoman soldiers endured the same ground. Thin rations, shells, thirst, disease, but they owned the heights and could reinforce faster. German advisors refined defenses. Terrain finished the job. The peninsula's spurs focused every push into lanes a defender could see and rake. Even victories were temporary. The dead lay close enough to hear the other side speak. Evacuation arrived as logic. By November, the storms came. Men drowned in trenches when rain turned gullies into mud. Frozen nights cracked lips and morale. London authorized withdrawal in stages, first at Suvla and Anzac in December, then at Hellas in January 1916. The one clear success was the evacuation, quiet, careful, professional. Mule shoes were wrapped. Rifles were rigged to fire on delayed drips to mimic sentries. In the last nights, beaches emptied under mist on the Allies' side. Boats slid out in near silence, while the lines behind them held their breath. When the numbers were tallied, they were the kind that sand memory. Allied forces suffered over 250,000 casualties, killed, wounded, missing, sick. Ottoman casualties were comparable, staggering for a nation already strained. The plan failed. Constantinople did not fall. The straits stayed closed to Allied ships. A year had been spent to draw a line on a map that bent but did not break. What remained were consequences. Mustafa Kemal emerged a national figure. His skill and resolve foreshadowed leadership that would define modern Turkey. For Australia and New Zealand, April 25th, Anzac Day, became a day of mourning and identity. The mythology of Gallipoli, stripped of romance by the facts, still carried a charge. Courage under hopeless conditions, loyalty sideways when nothing moved forward, humor used like a tourniquet. For Britain and France, it was misjudgment and bravery spent for no leverage, an expedition that promised a key and delivered a lesson. Families felt the campaign longest, in empty places at tables. Men who returned carried the place home, in limps and nightmares. The dead stayed on the peninsula under low headstones with unit badges cut into stone. Graves of both sides faced the same sea and wind. Tourists later traced names while Wind Off the Dardanelles pressed shirts as it once pressed uniforms. The peninsula kept what it was given and offered back quiet. Gallipoli never lost its power for those who stood in those gullies. Veterans remembered time crushed under boots, dust turned to paste with sweat, shrapnel arriving like tearing linen. They remembered small mercies, shared cigarettes, a water bottle passed across a parapet, a letter that made it through. In the end, none of those mercies changed the map. The lesson is simple, but stubborn. Terrain matters, logistics decide, and leadership must fit the facts rather than the hope. An army that lands under guns must reach higher ground fast or accept a ledger written in advance by the heights. Thank you for listening to Last Post History. Subscribe for more true stories from the world at war.